Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya Yato Anvayaditaratascha Artheshu Abhignaswarat Tene Brahmahridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yat Surayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatrat Prasargo Mrisha Dhamna Swena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukad Amrita Drava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. We now enter the 19th chapter of the 11th Skandha of Bhagavatam. The last two chapters we saw Krishna describe the four varnas and the four ashramas in detail leading up to the sannyasa. Now Krishna continues. He says, what is the mark of true wisdom? He says the true mark of wisdom is that one who has realized the self does not have any interest in logical reasoning, and he simply sees the whole world as a fleeting set of appearances and not attached to it. Maya matramidam jnatva jnanam cha mayi samyaset. He says he simply sees this world as a illusory, transitory appearance of images constantly fleeting, and therefore he is not even attached in any knowledge of this world, but he simply sees everything as abiding in the pure supreme being, which is all there is. So he says, to such a man of wisdom, I am the only beloved. I am the true purpose, the true goal, the highest heaven, the true freedom. There is nothing other than me. So here beautifully Krishna describes the highest state. He says, the one who is free of attachment to me and mine, free of attachment to this world, free of attachment to the coming and going of various events and people and so on, he simply perceives nothing as real except the ground in which everything appears, and the ground in which everything appears is the pure being, the supreme being, that which never changes. So he says, Jnaninas tu ahameva ishtaha swarto hetuscha sammatah swargascha eva apavargascha na anyarto madrite priyah. Beautifully he says, for jnanis, I am the beloved, ahameva ishtaha swarto, I am the goal and the purpose, swarto hetuscha, I am heaven, swargaha, I am liberation, apavargaha, and nothing other than me exists, because the supreme being, the state of the substrate of everything, that in which everything comes and goes, the ground of being itself, which is unchanging, that is the only truth, only reality, only heaven, only freedom. That's the only goal and the means. So Krishna says it's not that there are many other means to reach this goal. To abide as this is the means, and that is the goal as well. Therefore, Krishna says the one whose mind is thoroughly purified through this knowledge, through this wisdom, he recognizes me. So, as said already, the means and the end are the same. So, by being free of the false sense of me and mine and abiding as the ground of being, one recognizes the ground of being. And so he says nothing else, all the other practices, asceticism, going here and there to sacred places, holy waters, muttering various prayers, charity, various other purifying agencies, none of them brings about the perfection that is brought about by this wisdom. He says, tapas tirtam japo dhanam pavitrani tarani cha nalam kurvanti tam siddhim ya jnana kalaya krita. As one ray of jnana, one ray of wisdom, this supreme wisdom of the ground of being as the only unchanging reality, and there being nothing other than that, and that is also not a thing. The ground of reality is just pure being, and therefore recognizing the emptiness of all the various things that come and go, emptiness of the body, the senses, the mind, everything, and the only full presence of the being, this is the highest wisdom and nothing else. All other practices, asceticism, going to pilgrimage sites, doing charity, chanting mantras, they are all still engaged in the various phenomena that come and go. Whereas this is the direct recognition of the underlying, abiding, ever present being. Therefore, Krishna says, know that to be your true self, and with such knowledge, be in true devotion. So that's true devotion too. Devotion is not dualistic, therefore, but the recognition that I, as I know myself, do not exist, and all that exists is God alone. It is God that appears through His divine energy as all that there is, and to recognize that and therefore surrender completely to the only truth there is devotion. So Krishna says, having thus worshipped me as the true controller and bestower and pervader of all beings, the sages recognize me as their final beatitude. He says, Jnana Vijnana Sampanno Bhajamam Bhakti Bhavitaha. Therefore, with this jnana and vijnana, with this knowledge and realization, be devoted to me, and this way the threefold modifications of nature, that is the body, the senses, and the mind, which goes through 6 states, that is birth, existence, growth, transformation, slow decay, and death, none of this affects you, just as the various moving clouds do not affect the sun, or the various appearances of the images on a screen does not affect the screen. Similarly, none of this will affect you. The body can go through any changes, the mind, the senses, but all of them are happening on the ground of being, which is unchanging. So now Uddhava asks a question. He says, please tell me in more detail the difference between jnana and bhakti. So Krishna has indicated already that jnana and bhakti are essentially the same, but of course there are some process-wise differences in them, but the ultimate state of jnana and bhakti are one and the same. So here Uddhava is asking about the process of jnana and bhakti, and he says there is nothing other than you who's the refuge for all calamities. So various calamities that affect one, it is said they are threefold: through divine agencies like natural calamities, through other living beings, and through one's own body and mind. These are the 3 types of calamities that come. They are called Adideva, Adibhuta, Adhyatmika. And all 3 types of calamities are suffering. They all are rooted in the false sense of me, and therefore the only relief from them is your lotus feet, the pure being who abides as the ground of all. So Krishna now replies that yes, Yudhishthira in fact asked the same question to Bhishma. So Krishna recalls the incident which came all the way back in the first Skandha, which we have seen, where on the deathbed, on the bed of arrows, Yudhishthira lying in the battle, Bhishma rather lying in the battlefield, Yudhishthira goes to him along with Krishna himself and all the brothers, and Yudhishthira poses questions to Bhishma, and Bhishma very lovingly answers Yudhishthira on the right dharma, and then glorifies Krishna in the most beautiful prayer called Bhishma Stuti before he leaves the body. So Krishna recalls that incident, and the reason is that Bhishma exactly answered the very same question of Yudhishthira on Jnana and Bhakti, and therefore Krishna says, this is the question that Yudhishthira posed as well, and Bhishma answered. Now let me answer your question just as Bhishma answered. And then he says first Jnana. He says, what is Jnana or wisdom? It is the recognition that everything that appears is permeated by the one supreme truth. So everything that appears is the Prakriti, which is the primordial matter, the cosmic intelligence, the ego, the subtle elements of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, the gross elements of space, air, fire, water, and soil, the senses of perception, the senses of action, the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, all of these which form the whole material universe, from the most powerful being to the blade of grass, Krishna says all of this is permeated by the one supreme being. To recognize this is jnana, and furthermore what's called vijnana, or the highest realization, is to not even see the multitude. So jnana is to see all the various beings of the universe as pervaded by the supreme being. Vijnana, or the highest realization, is to not even see that multitude, but see only the Supreme Being. That is, there is no diversity in the eyes of a truly realized sage. That is Vijnana. And in this stage, all that is seen is only the Supreme Being, seemingly, apparently appearing as various entities. Therefore, Krishna says that is the only truth, which is the same, unchanging in the beginning, middle, and end. And that is what is declared as the highest truth. So, to not even see many things and then see them as being permeated by the Supreme, because everything that there is doesn't actually stay. If you look at anything, it keeps changing constantly. So, only thing that remains unchanging is the essence of the thing, which is not a thing, which is the supreme essence, which is pure being. So, to see this is the highest realization. And Krishna says this is the highest realization declared by all the various pramanas. Pramanas means the various means of recognizing knowledge, or what is called as epistemology. So, the various forms of epistemology are scriptures, Shruti, direct perception, which is called Pratyaksha, and logical inference called Anumana, and so on. And all of these lead us to the same conclusion that there is no plurality, there is no diversity in reality. All there is one, the supreme essence that pervades everywhere and everything. Therefore, recognizing this, see that all the rituals that are there are only transient, and therefore no ritual is necessary for the one who is abiding in this jnana. This is the process of jnana. Now Krishna moves to bhakti, and he says bhakti or devotion is a process I have described to you before, but I'll tell you again because you are interested. He says punascha kathayishyami mad bhakte karanam param. Because you are a dear devotee, I'll tell you again. He says, what is bhakti? He gives so many qualities. He says, reverence to hear my story. So the process of bhakti is out of love, out of adoring the Supreme Being, appearing as Krishna or as the various avatars, giving one's heart and love to Him, and thereby losing one's ego. This is the process of bhakti. So Krishna says, Shraddhamrita Kathayam, with reverence listening to my stories, Sashvad Mad Anukirtanam, constantly glorifying me, Parinishtacha Pujayam, constantly worshipping me, Stutibis Tavanam Mama, and glorifying me. And then he goes on to say, constantly revering me and the devotees who surrender unto me. So to be revering the devotees is greater than even revering God. And by offering various articles of worship, by engaging thought, speech, and body in the service of God, and by using everything, wealth and various luxuries, everything only towards devotion, by engaging in any activity, whether it be sacrifices, charity, prayers, fasts, all of this as only related to me, the Supreme Being, not for any temporary goal, any selfish goal, but doing them as only offered unto me. And thereby one engages in the process of devotion. That's why every prayer normally is concluded by saying Sarvam Krishna Arpanam Astu. So everything is surrendered unto Krishna. This is what is said by many, because every prayer, every sacrifice, every austerity, everything is meant to only recognize the Supreme Being as the essence, not for personal goals. Therefore, Krishna says, this is true devotion, and it is nothing but all absorbing love for me, by which automatically one's heart flowers and one's false sense of separation goes away, and nothing else remains to be accomplished. So, as we can see, the process of jnana is to discern and recognize only the Supreme Being as the essence of all things and nothing else. The process of bhakti is to come to the same point, but by this process of devotion, love, service, worship, glorification, through which one loses the sense of me and the other, and thereby coming to the same point of seeing only God as the only truth. So Krishna says, therefore, all that matters is finally the mind which is filled with sattva, purity, and that's tranquil and that's devoted to me, that acquires wisdom, devotion, dispassion, everything. So he says, Dharmam, Jnanam, Savairagyam, Aishwaryam cha abhipadyate. Everything, Dharma, righteousness, Jnanam, wisdom, Vairagyam, dispassion, all is acquired by the mind that is pure. On the other hand, that the mind which is constantly caught in sense gratification, it sees plurality, it sees diversity, and thereby it's caught in unrighteousness and passion. Therefore, Krishna concludes this particular discourse by saying, anything that engenders devotion is dharma, and anything that enables one to perceive the oneness is jnana, and anything that removes taste for sense gratification is vairagya. He says, Dharmo madbhakti krit proktau jnanam cha ekatmya darshanam guneshu asango vairagyam. So this is the perfect summary of this. What is true dharma? Pure devotion, madbhakti. What is jnanam? Ekatmya darshanam. That is to see only one soul, one self of all. What is vairagya? Dispassion is to guneshu asango. That is being aloof from sense gratification. So these are the three qualities. Dharma, jnana, vairagya are nothing but devotion, vision of oneness, and dispassion. So now Uddhava finally concluding this chapter with a series of questions. Uddhava asks Krishna very nicely a sequence of questions. He asks, what is yama, what is niyama, what is shama, dhamma? So these are all various qualities that are described in Vedanta and in Yoga. Yoga has yama and niyama. Vedanta talks about shama, dhamma, titiksha, and so on. And then there are various scriptures that talk about various other qualities. So he asks all of them. He says, what is yama and niyama? What is shama, dhamma? What is titiksha, which is endurance? What is charity? What is tapas? What is valor? What is truthfulness? What is true wealth? What is sacrifice? What is true gift? What is true strength? What is fortune? What is the true gain? What is the supreme wisdom? What is happiness? What is misery? What is true wisdom? Who is rather a wise man? Who is a fool? What is the way of virtue? What is the way of ignorance? What is heaven? What is hell? Who is a friend? What is the home? Who is opulent? Who is destitute? Who is pitiable? Who is the true master? So there is a beautiful sequence of questions that Uddhava just completely arrays one after another. He says very nicely, Kaha Shama, Ko Dhama, Krishna, Ka Titiksha, Dhriti Prabho, Kim Danam, Kim Tapas Shauryam, Kim Satyam Mritam Uchyate. So he goes on like this. What is dana? That is, what is charity? What is austerity? What is cleanliness? What is sacrifice? What is wisdom? So we saw all the questions. So now Krishna answers all of them very beautifully and sequentially. He says first yama niyama, which comes in yoga too. He says harmlessness, speaking only wholesome, agreeable truth, not coveting or thieving from anyone, that is not stealing, absence of attachment, modesty, not accumulating anything, faith or reverence, chastity, silence, firmness, forgiveness, fearlessness, cleanliness, purity of the mind, muttering Gayatri mantra, chanting Gayatri mantra, austerity, engaging in sacred fires, reverence, hospitality, and offering worship, visiting sacred places, being content, serving the Guru. These are all the yamas and niyamas. That is, there are 24 here total. Everything is beautifully given here. He says ahimsa, satyam, asteyam, asango, and so on. He goes on. So as we saw, it's harmlessness, modesty, non-accumulation of wealth, forgiveness, fearlessness, and all the rest. They form the 24 qualities listed. Then Shama is nothing but surrendering the intellect unto me, he says. Dhamma is controlling all the senses. Titiksha means endurance, equanimity of the opposites. And firmness means being free of the temptations of the tongue and sex. And then giving up enmity is the highest form of charity, which is very interesting. Not giving gifts and so on, but giving up enmity is the highest form of giving. Austerity, the highest austerity is to abandon luxuries. The greatest valor is to curb one's natural tendencies. So, again, valor is not to defeat others, but to defeat one's own tendencies or cravings. Truthfulness is therefore to perceive unity or oneness in everything. Cleanliness is to be free of attachment. That's the highest form of cleanliness. Renunciation is to be free of attachment to the results of actions. Righteousness is the greatest wealth. Sacrifice, he asks, what is yajna? Krishna says, I am sacrifice. So, yajna is called Vishnu. The Supreme Being is the sacrifice, highest sacrifice. The greatest gift is the one that is made to the Guru, who imparts wisdom. Pranayama, or regulating breath, is the highest strength. So, highest strength is not physical but mental, because by regulating breath, one is able to regulate the mind. That is the highest strength. Highest fortune is the divine state of the Supreme Being. And Krishna says the highest gain is to get devotion unto me. And wisdom is to be free of diversity. And virtues like desirelessness, happiness, and so on is the true adornment. And he asks, who is a fool and who is a scholar? Krishna says the one who sees his body as a self is the fool, and the one who realizes me as the only truth is a scholar. And what is the right path? The path that leads to recognizing this truth is the right path. The path that leads to diversity is the wrong path. Heaven is predominance of purity or sattva guna. Hell is predominance of ignorance or tamo guna. One's true friend is one's own guru, who is non-different from me. The greatest place of abidance is one's own body, because that's where one can realize the truth. So that's why the human body is a great gift, because in this body, with all the faculties one is endowed with, one can recognize this truth. And the one who is abounded, or who is got boundless virtues, by recognizing the truth, is opulent. The one who is constantly in discontentment, he is the destitute. So it's not about having wealth, but if one is not content within, then he is a destitute. But the one who is content within, he is the true rich person. The one who is a master of his own self, that is, whose mind is not constantly turbulent, he is the true master. And the one who is constantly addicted to his senses is the slave. So this is how Krishna answers all these questions very beautifully. Every question is being answered perfectly from the highest standpoint. Not relatively, but from the highest standpoint, Krishna has answered each of the questions of Uddhava, in terms of whether it be cleanliness, or whether it be wisdom, or whether it be heaven. All of these are defined as connected to the Supreme Being and the realization of the Supreme Being. And therefore, with this, Krishna concludes this chapter and says, finally, very beautifully, he says, O Uddhava, I have answered all your questions. But what is the use of asking all these elaborate questions? Simply know one thing: to see multitude and to see fault in others is evil, and to not see any fault or greatness in others, which is very interesting. It is not to see greatness in others and to praise others, because that's as much a problem as finding fault with others. So, to be free of either fault finding or praising, but to recognize that ultimately everything is simply an appearance and all there is only the Supreme Being, that is the highest good. So, Krishna says, recognize this, be free of either fault finding or praising others, which is the source of all evil, and simply recognize that this habit of finding fault or praising others is the root of illusion, and therefore being free of this habit and seeing everything as me is the highest wisdom. And with this chapter concludes. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.